This is Seamus here with the True Story, and I'm going to be straight with you. You dig giant robots, I dig giant robots, heck, we all dig giant robots. But above all else, chicks dig giant robots. Nice. Now in terms of the Mecha franchise, I can cover a lot of things. Things like Armored Core, Metal Wolf Chaos, Zone of the Enders, and many others. But I'm not going to talk about any of those today. Instead, I'm going to be talking about this little guy right here. In 1979, a man by the name of Yoshiyuki Tomino wrote and directed an anime series entitled Mobile Suit Gundam. Before this, anime series with giant robots were overly cheesy and unrealistic, hence were dubbed super robot shows. Gundam broke that trend, thanks to its realistic depiction of war, as well as tackling mature themes such as politics, corruption, and genocide. Couple this with the inclusion of giant robots, and it surprisingly was a really good combination. Now I could talk about the multitude of series set in alternate universes and time frames, how Sid Mead of Blade Runner fame designed the Turn 8 Gundam, or even the franchise's interpretation of Jesus. But we've got a game to cover, so let's stop chasing these white rabbit robots and let's get started. Gundam Extreme Versus celebrates the 10th anniversary of the Gundam Versus series. While previous games were developed by Capcom, this was the first game in the series to be developed by Namco Bandai. The game was originally released in arcades in 2010, with a PlayStation 3 port releasing the following year. Expectations were high for this installment, so was it worth the hype? Let's find out. The story is, Gundams fighting final boss robot. There is no story! I'm well aware that arcade games aren't crafted for storytelling, but at least previous console ports actually attempted at making a story, but unfortunately, we don't have that this time around. Of course, one isn't needed to make a good game, and Extreme Versus' combat system is deep and complex enough to facilitate many hours of playtime. Before I go into that though, I would highly recommend using an arcade stick if you intend to play on a non-casual level. This game was developed with the arcade environment in mind, and with the button combinations needed for basic gameplay and combo crafting, an arcade stick is the preferred control scheme. However, if that's an impossibility, and I know full well that an arcade stick is a costly investment, don't fret. You can customize your controls for a more enjoyable, personal experience with a DualShock 3. Combat takes place in a 3D environment, with 4 players split into 2 teams. The goal is to deplete the opponent's team gauge on the top left. Whoever runs out first loses. This is done mainly from ranged combat, with the occasional melee attack thrown in for good measure. Sounds a lot like a simple, mindless shooting game, but Extreme Versus goes above and beyond by heavily focusing on resource management. Not only does each weapon have its own ammunition, but movement as well as jumping is dictated through the use of a boost gauge. If you were to run out of said gauge, you'll be a sitting duck for a world of hurt. Combos come into play through cancelling moves by either sidestepping or boosting, the former having the ability to cancel the homing properties of ranged attacks, as well as creating psychedelic imagery. Whoa. Though the most distinct feature is the Extreme Burst system, which refills your ammo and boost, provides startup invincibility, buffs your attack and speed, and even gives certain characters super moves. All of this equates to a solid battle system, which rewards combo creativity and strategic movement. Advanced play comes in through using cover, applying strategic movements, and blocking. Playing against skilled players can lead to intense mind games, which creates a tense, exhilarating experience. That's not to say it isn't easy to get into. Because of its simplicity, Extreme Versus can be considered a game that is easy to play, yet hard to master. Don't get me wrong, there is plenty of depth present here for those who seek it, but for those on a more casual basis can dive right in and easily look good while doing it. The roster here is superb and well thought out. Each mobile suit is given a number, which relates to the amount of team gauge that will be lost if that unit is destroyed. Now seeing that this is an anime-based game, you'll be likely to assume that all the characters play the same. But you would be wrong. The diversity of the roster is really refreshing, like how certain Gundams focus on melee attacks, while others rely on setting traps around the map. And surprisingly, no one unit can be considered either useless or overpowered. Unlike certain anime games I know, the balanced roster helps escalate the game to being played on a more professional level, next to games like Street Fighter and Tekken. In fact, I had a lot of fun just mucking around with different characters in training mode, creating combos and learning the usefulness of each weapon. If you're looking for competition to hone your newfound skills, Extreme Versus has a lot to offer here. 4 players can take part in local split-screen battles, with high levels of customization you'd normally expect with a fighting game. Online play is also available out of the box. It's solid, when you can find a decent match to play. Since the game has only been released in Asia, if you were to import the game, good luck finding a match with a connection above red. You could make a room to gather English-speaking players. Just don't expect instant results. It's a crying shame for import players, because the online mode itself is really sound. Your traditional things are here, ranked in player matches, customizable rooms, and even the ability to save replays. But unless you like laggy controls, I would suggest organizing times with your friends to play locally or online, or scour message boards to see if you can get people to request a battle with you. When it comes to single player offerings, the quality is slightly tarnished. This is attributed to the lack of rewardable results for your actions. An arcade mode is present with the ability to pick your path, with the lower paths being significantly harder. Unfortunately, you get no worthwhile reward for trudging through the challenge of each level and finally defeating an extremely difficult final boss. A worthwhile reward would have been something like cinematic endings or unlockable mobile suits, but we don't have that here, which puts arcade mode's longevity into question. A mission mode is also given to you, and this is most likely where most of your time will be spent. The sheer amount of missions that are on offer here is simply astronomical! While all of them take around 2 to 3 minutes to complete, the ease of just jumping in a mission even when you haven't played the game in a while makes it perfect for bite-sized play. The missions themselves are your standard fare, like shooting down missiles, other mobile suits, and occasionally fighting giant-sized enemies. But because the mode forces you to use certain characters on certain missions, it makes the mode worth your time by letting you play as a variety of mobile suits you might not have touched otherwise. Also, unlike the other modes, completing certain missions will get you emblems to place on your online profile. It's not much, but at least it's something. Graphically, the game looks great. The lighting that bounces off each mobile suit can be compared to that of racing games, and the art style the designers used helps mesh the older mobile suit designs with the more modern ones. The stages are also incredibly diverse, with a lot of detail put into the backgrounds, as well as having a great sense of scale with objects like buildings and battleships being clearly shown in all their glory. With all this in mind, Extreme Versus can be a great game to watch with all the action on screen, even when watching a match on a non-professional level. Technically, even with all the lasers and destructible environments, there are no frame rate issues, and excluding mild glitches on environmental objects, the game runs incredibly smoothly. Aside from the game itself, the cinematic cutscenes used to introduce each series are dynamic, exciting, and definitely capture the spirit of each series, OVA, or film they cover. As for music, the soundtrack is comprised of original tunes as well as including well-known themes from various Gundam properties. However, should you find yourself not liking a particular song, you can always use songs on your PS3 hard drive thanks to the custom soundtrack feature. As for the original soundtrack, they all have a nice futuristic feel to them, but they aren't what I'd call memorable by any means. One interesting tidbit is the main theme of the game was actually done by Linkin Park. While I think the song itself is lacking because of its lack of unique tones for the majority of the song, as well as the group seemingly not putting in any effort until the very end, I always find it inspiring when popular Western figures aid the production of anime properties. Final thoughts. Unless you were busy paying your taxes or doing other things, you'd have put together that Gundam Extreme Versus is downright marvelous. Even with the language barrier, because there is no story, all you have is the intricate combat system with a cast of unique mobile suits, and that's all you really need. I do wish there were more unlockables to keep me coming back to the arcade mode, though the sheer bulk of mission mode is more than enough for the price of entry. An updated version of Extreme Versus has been released in Japanese arcades, dubbed Extreme Versus Full Boost, which includes your traditional additions such as balance adjusting, more characters and stages, and making the name stupidly long. I do see them porting Full Boost to consoles, but no plans have been made at the time of this review, so the original version is your only option for now. If this game has interested you in the slightest, even if you aren't a fan of Gundam, I implore you, go out and get a copy of this game. Who knows, you might just come out as a fan yourself. Regardless, this is Seamus from The True Story. Thanks for watching. Now if you excuse me, I have a Shinanju to polish.
This is the story of a hero. The story of a hero I love.